So, welcome back. Welcome, newcomers. And this is our second of two um, master classes for the festival competition. We had a great morning session here with Professor David Curtin, and he's been fabulous with everybody. He comes to us from Lock Haven, right? Yeah.
That's where I teach. I'm actually coming to you from State College, which is about 40 minutes away where I
Oh,
live.
State College, Pennsylvania. Oh, right. Okay. Get the two towns mixed up here. And he's performed all over the world, and he has degrees from SUNY Fredonia, um, Louisville, Kentucky, and Cincinnati Conservatory. And we're just so thrilled and fortunate to have him here today. So, welcome back again, David. Our first person up, we have Han Lee. Welcome. How are you?
Good.
Um, so you're going to play some Haydn for us, right?
Yes.
Wonderful. Well, are you ready to go?
Okay.
Alrighty.
Okay, good. So were you planning on just doing the first movement today? You're not going to do the other movement. Okay, that's fine. Okay, very well done. How long have you been working on this piece?
1 month.
1 month. Okay, good. Um, so very often, in fact, almost always, in a piece of music like this, the very first thing that the composer indicates is the tempo, right? And then one of the first things after that is the meter, or the time signature, right? So the tempo of this piece is what?
1 and 2 and 1 and 2 and.
Okay, that's about the tempo you're playing it. What's the tempo? What did Haydn write as far as the tempo? The word that he used. Do you have it in your score there?
No.
No? Does it say allegro at the top of your music? Can you see the word allegro? Yes. Okay. So that's very important. And the word allegro is actually kind of an interesting word. Do you know what it means?
No.
No? Okay, that's all right. Well, it means a couple of different things. Usually when music teachers teach these different words, they say, well, allegro means fast. And kind of does, but not exactly. What language is this in, by the way? The word allegro, what language do you think that is? Do you know?
No.
Okay. It's Italian, like a lot of the words, that we use in music. It's an Italian word, and it actually means cheerfully, right? So it doesn't exactly mean fast, but usually when musicians see the word allegro, they think, oh, fast. But it means speed, which is fast, but it also indicates, maybe more importantly, indicates a mood, which is cheerful, right? So it's supposed to sound cheerful, and it's also fast. Well, fast is kind of a relative term, right? I mean, if you might think that you can run pretty fast, but compared to, let's say, a deer or a cheetah, you're not fast at all. You're pretty slow, right? But compared to a turtle, you're fast. So that's what I mean. It's a relative term, fast. What we mean when we say relative means fast compared to what, right? Rather than being in what we might call an absolute term. If I were to use an absolute term, that would be like a measurement. And there is a speed that is usually kind of understood to be allegro, which is around 120 beats per minute. When we see something that is marked allegro, we generally think, okay, that's about 120 beats per minute or 2 beats per second. So if you think of like a clock, a ticking clock, that's like 1,000, 2, 1,000. That's the second hand on a clock, right? Tick, 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 1,000. So that's 60 beats per minute. 120 beats would be exactly double that. So we can think of it this way: 1,000, 2, 1,000, 2, right? So this is about 120 beats per minute. Okay, now, next question. What does 2/4 mean? That's what the meter signature is, right? You have 2/4 written in the music?
2 fractions in a beat.
Right. Now, why did he write 2/4 and not, let's say, 2/2, which is cut time? Or why not 2/8? Why 2/4? And don't feel bad if you haven't thought about this before, or if you don't know the answer. That's okay. I think what Haydn wants us to do is to feel the beat with the quarter note, right? So that if we're listening to this music and tapping our foot, we should be tapping our foot to the quarter note, right? That's what 2/4 really means is there are 2 quarter notes. That's what the 4 really means, quarter notes or crotchets, right? 2 quarter notes in every measure of music. Now, there could also be 4/8 notes or 8/16 notes or 1/2 note. But the reason he says two quarter notes is that he's telling you the quarter note is the unit of beat, is the thing that you should be tapping your foot to. If you're listening to this music, your foot should be tapping along to the quarter note. And there should be two of them in every measure. And those quarter notes should be happening at roughly something like 2 per second. Now, the reason I'm saying all this is that when I hear you play it, I find myself tapping my foot more to the 8th note. It's sort of like you're playing this in 4/8 instead of 2/4. And basically what I've just done for the past 5 minutes is give you a very lengthy explanation of why I think you're going too slow. Now, it's understandable if you're in the, you've only had the piece for a month, and it's better to play it well, a little slower, than play it badly faster, if we need time to get it up to speed. But your goal should be to play this quite a bit faster, so that I feel it with the quarter note, like okay, so that it's not la da 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 dum ba dum bum bum. You see the difference? Right, and notice that like if Haydn had written this in cut time, in 2/2, he could have written everything 8 so that the rhythm would be exactly the same. But let's say those first 4 notes would have been 16th notes instead of 32nd notes. And instead of 8th notes in the next measure, we would have quarter notes, et cetera, et cetera. But it would sound the same, but it would look different. Haydn deliberately chose to write this in 2/4, which means that those first 4 notes are 32nd notes, so that when the musician looks at those 32nd notes, say, "Whoa, those are quick notes," and it should sound sort of like this, right? And you can base the rest of the tempo off of that, right? Something like that, right? So like those first 5 notes should just be like flicking. Can you play just those first 5 notes for me and flick them very lightly, like? Good. What fingering are you using? Are you just doing 5, 4, 3, 2, 1? Just 5 fingers?
4, 3, 2, 1.
I would probably not do that myself. Now, fingering is very, if your teacher told you to do that way, I'm not necessarily trying to contradict, but I think it slows you down. I don't think it's necessary to do that. Like, I think, and it might not make much difference, actually. You could probably do it, but you should try it, just 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. The other thing is that if you end up with your, now I could see maybe that probably the reason if your teacher suggested that, it's because the first 4 notes are grouped together with a slur, which doesn't go over to that G. And so I can see that. But the other advantage is if you wind up with your thumb on the G, it makes it easier to get the next 2 notes, the E and the G that's up an octave, right? Because you're using, with your thumb here, you're that much closer with the rest of your fingers to the E and the G. Whereas if you wind up on 2 or something, you're farther away, right? And at the speed that this piece has to go, it's important to try and make things easier for yourself. And also, at the speed that this piece is going to go, you're never going to hear the difference. In other words, the 4 notes that are connected and then the G on the downbeat that's separated, you're never going to have much of a separation anyway. At the speed this piece is going, it's like bum 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 bum, right?
We're at 7 minutes.
Okay. So can you maybe? And this is my other question I was going to ask you. When you practice, do you use a metronome?
Yes.
You do. Okay. Do you use it like? How often do you use it? Do you use it like whenever you practice, or just only sometimes, or?
Sometimes.
Sorry?
Sometimes.
Sometimes? Okay. I would, my own, do you see, my metronome is right over here. Oh, sorry, on the other side. See my metronome right there? I almost always have the metronome going when I'm practicing. Now, different people are very different. There's some people who don't like to use the metronome very much, but I use it almost all the time because, for one thing, I want to know exactly what speed I'm playing anything, right? When I'm practicing that. And I also want to make sure that I am getting up to speed gradually. It's not so much about being able to keep a steady beat. You know, most people can keep a steady beat, although it can be helpful there too. It's more about knowing exactly what speed you are playing something now and having a goal to work towards and getting up to that goal very gradually. So if I want to play something at 120, I might start out playing it at 60, and then maybe at 65, and then I play it again at 70 and 75 and 80, and I might even go more gradual than that, because I want to get up to speed in such a way that it never really feels fast, because I got there so gradually. It's sort of like when you go from a cold place to a very hot place, right? Like if you step out of an air-conditioned building into very hot outside in the summer, it's like a shock. It's like, wow, it's so hot out here. And the same thing the other way around. But if it gradually got warmer, you know, then you wouldn't necessarily suddenly feel hot, right? That's kind of like what we have to do when we practice. We start very slow so we feel very comfortable and very relaxed. And then using the metronome over there, we gradually increase the speed so that it never really feels a lot faster. Because if it feels a lot faster, we're going to be mentally tense. We're going to be worried. We might, you know, play more wrong notes or something. But if it just feels a little bit faster each time, then you can get up to speed, I think, in a more relaxed way. So the reason I ask about the metronome is there were places where your tempo slowed down quite a bit and wasn't very steady. And especially in music of the classical era, which this piece is, right? It's Haydn. It tends to move along pretty steady and not have a lot of speeding up or slowing down, usually. Okay, so we want to, if we want to work with the metronome a lot so that we get in the habit of playing at a steady tempo, unless there's a reason to slow down or speed up or take a little bit of time. And then you have a reason that is related to the music, not just a reason like, well, this part is harder, so I have to slow down. That's not a very good reason, right? Okay, start at the beginning one more time and see if you can go a little bit faster, something more cheerfully. That's good. Good. Now, you just came to the end of a phrase there, right? You had an 8-measure phrase. Can you slightly set off the next phrase? In other words, it's sort of like a period at the end of the sentence. If I'm talking to you, I might speak a sentence, and then I come to a period at the end of that sentence. And then there's a tiny pause, and I start the next sentence. And that way we know we've gotten to the end of one sentence and the beginning of the other. Similar kind of thing in music, right? So when you get to the end of that, yum, bum, bum, just take a tiny little breath before you start the next one. Can you try that?
Okay.
Good. Okay, that's good. Now that was probably a little bit too much time, but that's fine. So you might start out actually doing just what you did, too much time, and then say, okay, that's really too much. Let's do a little bit less, but still have a little bit of time so that people know we've finished one sentence and started the next one. You know what I mean? One other thing I want to point out, whenever you have something like this, can you make sure that that's more than less, right? You don't want to do this, okay? That puts like a bump at the end of the phrase. Again, it's very much like speaking in sentences. If I say to you something like, "Oh, hello, Han, how are you today?" I would never say like, "Hello, Han, how are you today?" Right? Because it kind of sticks out at the end of the sentence. Can you try like that? Maybe just play that measure here, and make a nice taper at the end. Yeah, you can think down and then up, down, up. Yes, so that you're kind of lifting off even as you push down. I think, yes, that's much better. I guess we're probably out of time, James.
Yeah, unfortunately, but this has been great.
Great job.
Yeah,
Very nice to hear you.
bravo. Thank you. Okay, we have Isabelle next. I see Isabelle's in the room here. And you can turn on your camera, and Han, you can turn yours off. And there we go. Welcome, Isabelle.
Isabelle.
Oh, yep, she's muted. Okay. How are you?
Good.
And this is Professor David Curtin, and you'll be working with him here, and we're happy to have you. And let's see here. What do we have here? Oh, you're going to be playing some Bach. Yeah. I'm ready to go when.
Is this the invention or
The Symphonia
it is the symphony? All right, yeah.
in B minor.
Okay, great.
All right, we ready?
Yep.
All right, take it away.
Good, very good. Okay. So I think you basically play this very well. You're technically very well in control of it. I think maybe the main thing we could do is work on shaping it a little bit better. So, for example, in the left hand at the very beginning, we have this figure, la da 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 dum, da 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 dum. And that comes back quite a lot, right, in both hands. Whenever you have that, first of all, notice that that figure starts on the weak, on the sub weak beat, on a weak part of the weak beat, which means that the very first note should be kind of downplayed. It shouldn't be da 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 dum. We should think more like this. Da 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 da. Right? Da 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 da. Try and underplay the very first note, and really the peak is the D and not the B. So we should think of the B and the C sharp as leading to the D. So there's like a tiny little crescendo there. Can you exaggerate the ups and downs as if there's little crescendos when it goes up and decrescendos when it goes down? Try that. Good. And I would say also that A sharp, now the A sharp is on the downbeat, but it's at a low point in the shape of this melody. So we don't want to sort of almost accent it or land on it too hard just because it's on the beat, right? So we don't want something that sounds like right? We want something more like right? Don't make too much of bar lines and downbeats, right? The meter in a piece of music is something that is there, and we definitely need to be aware of it, but it should be something that's more in the background, and it shouldn't intrude too much. In other words, we shouldn't be always feeling here's the beat. It should be right? The melody should not be sort of like held down by the beat, right? So especially in music that is very linear, like all of Bach is, right? There are these long melodies very often as part of the Baroque style, and we want the melodies to sort of rise above the bar lines and have their own shape and not be punctuated by the strong beats. The strong beats are already strong. We will, you have a good sense of rhythm. You play in time nicely. You don't need to help us to understand where the beats are, right? So let's try that again and maybe play with both hands this time and be thinking about shaping the left hand in the way that you would sing it.
The whole song or just that line or bar?
You can start at the beginning and I might stop you at some point. Okay. Good. That your first, 6 or 7 measures, much better. Now, when we get into measures 8, 9, and 10, Bach takes that same motive and uses it as the basis for a sequence, right? So we hear it in the left hand. Actually, we call that a circle of fifths sequence, circle of fifths progression. So we have to remember to keep shaping it that way. So resist the temptation to do like da 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 dum, ba da 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 dum. Each time, the very first note of that should be underplayed, and instead think of the note that's at the peak, that you're going towards the peak and then away from the peak. Okay, you could start anywhere in there.
Okay.
So one other thing, so we have this figure of the 30-second notes. And the very first time we have that figure, measure 3, it's just the right hand, right? And then the second time we have that figure, it's both hands together. But then the third and fourth times, it's both hands together, but separated in time. So the right hand plays first, and then the second hand, the left hand comes in, so that something that was like this is now like that, right? And this is interesting because it gives us an opportunity to really bring out the shape. Now, whenever you play this, I would, the overall shape is sort of like high to low, right? So, and now there are little shapes inside the overall shape, but the overall shape, at least the first time and second time we hear it, is from high to low, like it gets lower, starts higher and gets lower. So what I would do, what I think that naturally should make us do, is to start a little louder and get softer. I was saying a little bit earlier in the last master class that whenever we play the piano, ideally we should, almost always, we should be thinking in terms of singing, because the human voice is the original instrument that we are all born with, and all the other instruments really are usually just kind of imitating the human voice, or should be. And when we sing, we generally sing higher notes louder and lower notes softer. We do this without even really thinking about it, because that's the way the human voice works. In order to reach those high notes, you usually have to push more air, and therefore it's louder. And as you get lower, you don't need as much air to reach that note, and so it gets softer. So now this isn't always true in all music, like all high notes should always be loud and all low notes should be softer. It's not always true, but as a general rule of phrasing, it pretty much holds true. So that if you think about how you would sing this, now this is pretty difficult to sing, all these 30-second notes, but you would do something like, and it gets softer as I get lower, right? So you should do the same thing with your hand. Let's try the very first one that is just your right hand. And can you exaggerate as much as possible as you go from high to low, go from louder to softer? Try it, just the right hand. No, that whole measure, measure 3. Play the whole measure in the right hand and give me a feeling of high to low and loud to soft. Yep, go ahead and play it at tempo and just exaggerate. Try and get as loud as you can on the high notes and as soft as you can on the lower notes. Let's overdo it. See how much we can make a shape of this. Good. I think, you know what, you could probably get even quieter toward the bottom. Your peak was really good. See how quiet you can get at the lower end. Good. Okay. And then we have the same thing. Now try the same thing 3 measures later where it's both hands. So in both hands now, you're going to reach a peak maximum loudness at the top. And when you get to the bottom, try and get it as soft as you can. Just barely touching the keys. Good. Try it again. Feel free you can go a little slow if you want to.
7 minutes.
Good. Now, this is the tricky part. 4 measures later, you're going to do the same thing, but now that figure, that arpeggio, basically, is shifted, which means that your left hand, let's say when you're starting at measure 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. At measure 11, your right hand is reaching the bottom on beat 2, the bottom of its little motive, when your left hand is at the top, which means your right hand has to be soft, but your left hand is louder at that point. And then your left hand starts this figure and it starts getting lower, which means it's going to get softer. But then your right hand comes in on beat 3 and it has to be loud when your left hand is soft. So it's like we've got these, maybe they're this way, these decrescendos happening. I can't do this right. You see what I'm saying? So that we have a peak here that goes down to the tip, but then the left hand has its peak, and when it gets soft, then the right hand has its peak again, right? And that's going to be kind of tricky to do, but let's try that. Maybe go a little bit slower and start right there at measure 11, and I should hear each hand shaping in this exaggerated way, loud to soft. And when one hand's getting soft, the other hand is starting loud. See, I could hear when you got, this is very difficult to do. When you got to beat 3, because your left hand was starting to get softer, when your right hand came in, your right hand was soft, but your right hand should be loud at that point, even though the left hand is soft. You understand? Try it slow, try it under tempo. Good. And then at that moment, then your left hand comes in and it's pretty loud because it's at the top. Yes, this kind of thing is what makes Bach so difficult. It's not just that there are several different melodic lines going on at the same time, right? With different notes and different rhythms and whatever. That's difficult enough, but they have to be shaped independently of each other. And sometimes, very often, in fact, one phrase is in a sort of a valley when one hand is in a valley or one voice is in a valley when another voice is at a peak. So it's this shaping of different voices that makes it so difficult. And when you listen to the greatest Bach players, rather than mention some names, do you like go on YouTube and listen to different pianists playing this piece?
Yes.
Yep. What are some names of some pianists that you listen to that you like?
I don't know because they usually not. They don't always write their names, and I probably can't remember any of them.
Okay. All right. So that's fine. You know, this is one of the great things about the times we live in now. When I was your age, of course, there was no internet, there was no YouTube. We had, you know, records and cassettes and CDs. But now you can go on YouTube and you can find lots of different people playing lots of different pieces, and some of them will be, you know, just some guy in his basement, or and then others will be great pianists. What you should try and do is sort of like in the way that people who are like really into sports, you know, which I'm not, but you know, let's say if you are someone who's really into, if you like to play football or baseball or whatever, you know, maybe not only do you enjoy playing it yourself or watching, you know about the great players of whatever sport it is, and you know why they are great, and you know what particular games they played that were great. You know, like you know, maybe some tennis player in Wimbledon in 2005, Roger Federer or whatever. You know what I mean? You know the name. You know what he did, and you know why he's great. We should try to do the same thing with the pianists that we listen to. So you should seek out, for example, I'll just put a couple names. Definitely Glenn Gould, right? You should find, and you might not necessarily like the way he plays it, but find recordings by Glenn Gould of Bach. And another one I'm going to recommend is the pianist Andras Schiff. Okay, so just those two. I mean, there's lots and lots of great Bach players, but find those two and find try and find pianists who, let's say, have many millions of views and are obviously like a, big name professional pianist, rather than, someone who might be very fine, might be very good, but and analyze what they do, listen to what they do, and you will find that they are masters. Those two in particular, but many others, are masters at shaping individual lines. And it's very difficult because you kind of have to split your brain up into different people, really. You're not just one person playing, you're like several different people playing at the same time, in a way, if you understand. Good. Of course, later on in this piece, those same figures are inverted, are turned upside down. So now that arpeggio figure is now going up instead of going down, which means now you're going to start it softer and build up and get louder. And in Bach, and also maybe in like classical era music, a lot of times you can get yourself to sound louder or softer merely by lifting your fingers higher for the louder parts and being much more shallow for the softer parts. And that will also keep the articulation nice and clear. I guess we're probably about out of time. Is that the case?
We are, yeah. Yeah, it's always it's never enough time, and we could have an hour, it would still not be enough, unfortunately. But yeah, so we're ready to move on.
Okay, great job, Isabelle. Very nice to hear
Bravo.
you. Keep working.
Okay, I see Joy is here. Hi, Joy. Welcome.
Hello.
How are you? This is Professor David Curtin, and he's been having a blast with everybody today, and we're looking forward to hearing you. We have, Bach Fantasia in C minor. Are you ready? Okay. All right, let's go for it.
Good job.
Hey, just really quick, Joy, are you on a computer? Might you be able to turn your microphone down a little bit? Yeah, it's just a little loud. If you go into your audio settings and just slide that thing over to the left just a little bit.
How do I turn it down?
So, are you in your audio settings?
Yeah, I'm in the audio setting.
Do you see where it says test, where it says microphone?
Yeah.
And there's input volume? And
Yeah.
there's like this little, dot that you can move to the left or the right. Move that dot to the left just a little bit.
It's not letting me move it.
Oh, okay. You're not using the computer mic?
Yeah, I have a mic plugged in.
Okay, do you have a volume switch on the microphone? Or a gain knob?
I don't think so.
Okay, it wasn't terribly loud, but it was just a couple of times. So it'll be okay.
Okay.
Okay, good job.
First of all, would you maybe I just want to take a look at your music. Can you hold your music up to the camera so I can just get a look at it? You might have to, right now it just looks like okay. All right, I'm looking, and are there like crescendos and stuff written in there? And dynamic?
Not on this one.
Okay, that's good. I was just wondering because a lot of times, like I have my edition of that same piece, I don't even know where I got this, but I just happened to find that I have it, but it's a really bad edition because there's lots of editing written in there, a lot of stuff that Bach himself did not write. So this is just something to be on the lookout for with Bach. In almost all of Bach's keyboard music, certainly the notes will be there, the pitches and the rhythms, but there's usually no dynamics written in, and usually no articulation written in. So if you see that kind of stuff, and this was a problem a long time ago, more than today. Today, I think, depending on what edition you buy, the good editions won't have a lot of additional stuff. They'll have really just what Bach wrote, so that you really know what he wrote and not what some editor thought would be a good idea. So I was just wondering. Anyway, so my first question is, what does that, in this context, what does that title, fantasy, mean? Do you have any idea? Or have you even thought about it much? No? Okay, that's all right. So maybe this is just the way my brain works, but I like to think about, I like to start at the beginning when I look at a piece of music. And as I mentioned to somebody else, very often the very first thing the composer writes is the tempo marking. So that's the first thing that you have to think about. And in this case, there probably isn't even a tempo marking. Bach very often didn't write tempo markings. It was just kind of understood. And the composer didn't usually feel like he needed to tell people what tempo, whereas later composers did. But the title also is an important clue, because the composer chooses a certain title and not another title. And sometimes the title and the tempo marking are the same thing, really, because sometimes, especially in the Baroque era, a composer would write a piece and not give it a title, maybe just say Largo in G. And the title is a tempo indication and also an indication of the mood. So in this case, the title is Fantasy. And the way that we use the word fantasy right now in whatever year it is, 2021, is not the same way that a composer in, let's say, 1721 or thereabouts would use the word. So today we think of fantasy, we think of like a dream, especially like I have a fantasy of one day winning the lottery and buying my own private vacation island where I can just sit on the beach all day. That would be a fantasy, right? But that's not really what this is about. In this case, fantasy as a musical title in the Baroque era basically means an improvisation. Now, how could it be an improvisation if it's written out? An improvisation is something you make up as you go along. Well, it's something that Bach wrote, but it's supposed to be performed in the style of someone just making something up, improvising on the keyboard, which classical musicians today, a lot of times it just never improvise. It's just not something that we really have to do anymore. Usually we're playing someone else's music that we have practiced and prepared, and then we perform. But in Bach's time, and even for a long time afterwards, it was just necessary. It was part of your job, especially as a keyboard player, to be able to just sit down and improvise something. And in fact, a lot of organists still do this because they have to improvise a prelude for a church service, and they will not have any music in front of them. They will just sit down and improvise. And that's basically what a fantasy is. So this is sort of like a kind of like a written out improvisation. So it should sound spontaneous. You should give us the feeling as you're playing this. You should convince us that you are improvising this, that you're just making it up out of your head, right? And that's kind of a difficult thing to do, especially when you're, the process is exactly the opposite. You've been practicing this, you've been working on it and drilling it and all of that, and that's very good. That's what we have to do. But when you perform it, you have to try and somehow convince us that you are just making this up. It's just stream of consciousness. You know what I mean? Okay, so one thing actually that is related to this is the way that we might do these ornaments. So for example, you have this ornament on the fourth beat of the first two measures. Well, I get, yeah, where you have when you do those, okay, when you do those, they sound a little bit too carefully planned to me. You know what I mean? Instead of just kind of improvised. Can you try it again? And when you get to those notes, just kind of let them go, and don't be too careful about exactly how many times you go back and forth on the trill or whatever. Play it as if you're just making it up on the spot, like a jazz pianist or something, you know? Can you try that from the beginning? Good, that's the idea. It's getting better. Yeah, I like that. Because otherwise, what happens is we get to the fourth beat, and it seems to slightly slow down as you try and get that trill exactly so. What's more important is I think that we keep the tempo and we get to the next beat on time. What fingering are you using when you do that? You're doing like three, like right, like that. Let's see. You might try, I don't know if it'll work for you or not. Fingering is very individual, but you might try starting that la da da dum with 4-3-2. Just try it. Try going 4-3-2, and then your thumb on the F. And I would probably go back and forth between, yeah, I guess 1 and 2 on the trill. But if you start with 4/3, it might enable you to get it quicker off the bat, you know. You know, you have to sort of hit the ground running on that, right? Just try it. You don't have to do it right now. It's sometimes hard to change fingerings, you know, right off the bat. And what you should do is try it the way that I just suggested. And if it doesn't feel like it works better, just try your own way. This is what I do when I'm learning a new piece. I'm working out fingerings. Especially if I'm playing Bach. I spend more time on fingerings with Bach than with other composers. First of all, because it's so easy to get lost or to get, you know, and so you really want to make sure your fingerings are set. Whatever fingerings you choose, that you have only one way that you have worked out. But what I do is, let's say I have something like that, and it's tricky, and there's more than one way of doing it. I will work out 2 or 3 different ways, and I'll try to give them equal time. I'll say, okay, let's try it with this fingering, try it a bunch of times, see how it goes. Then I'll try it with a different fingering, try it a bunch of times, see how it goes. Maybe 2 or 3 different fingerings, and I try them out, sort of like auditioning. And I say, okay, you, not good enough, you don't make it. You might work, you know. And I in the end, I try and, you know, I try different fingerings at the beginning and settle on whichever one seems to be the best. And then I write it in. Now, later on, I might change my mind, you know, but so if fingering can make a big difference, and sometimes you could spend weeks and months and something doesn't ever quite sound right because no matter how hard you work at it, the fingering you're using isn't ideal. You know, I don't know that's the case in this particular situation, but it might be. All right, let's start at the beginning and just keep going, and I might stop you again some other place and find something to talk about. Okay, there. Okay, Joy. I noticed that, and maybe it would be different if I were right there in the room with you rather than over the internet, whatever. But I noticed that I really like the way that you played those eighth note chords in measure 1 and measure 2. You do la da 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 dum bum da dum, which I think is correct. That's how I would articulate it. I would do it as a 2-note slur. The first chord longer and connected to the second chord, which is shorter. Yum ba dum, la da 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 dum, lum ba dum. But then the third time, measure 3, you do it differently. At least it sounded different to me. Ya da 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 dum, dum pum pum. Can you make sure that the articulation of those 2 eighth note chords is consistent? And I would do it just the way that you did it in measures 1 and 2. Yum ba dum, lum ba dum, like that. Can you try that from the beginning one more time? Okay. Good. When you get to, how should those 16th notes? Now we've had these triplets all up until this time. Every time we've had a 16th note, it's been a triplet. But then we get to whatever it is, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. We get to measure 8, and we have some 16th notes that are not triplets, right? So how should those sound? Right? I kind of lost what the beat was there. Can you just do the measure before that, measure 7 going into measure 8? Can you start right at measure 7 maybe and go into measure 8? Yeah. No. You're playing those 16th notes almost as if they're eighths or something. It should be yum up 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 yup up 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 up, right? Do, and when you get to this, it should be okay. Measure 7. Up, 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 up. Good. Have you practiced this with metronome? Yeah. Yeah. I was just telling another student, I almost always had the metronome on when I'm practicing. About the only time I don't have it on is in the very early stages when I'm just working out fingerings and trying out different fingerings. And then at the very end, after I've learned a piece pretty well, I say, okay, now I'm going to turn the metronome off and I'm going to practice performing it. But everything in between, and this is just my own personal approach, a lot of people do differently, but everything in between, I have the metronome on because I want to know exactly what speed I'm at, and I want to increase my speed gradually and all of this. And I also want to be able to play at a variety of different speeds. There's sometimes you see people who can only play the piece that they're working on at one speed. And if they go any faster, if they go any slower, they get thrown off and they can't do it. But in this case, what would really help you is you have to keep the basic beat consistent, whether you have triplets or regular 16ths. So if this is like okay, that's very important because otherwise we lose the beat at that spot. I think we're out of time because James popped back up.
We are. I know. It's like when I pop up, it's like, uh-oh. Yeah. Yeah. But yeah, this was great. Great job, Joy.
Thank you,
It was
Joy.
great to have you. And we'll hear you again soon. Who do we have next? Agnes. Are you there?
Yeah.
By the way, James, am I yelling?
No, you're not.
Okay, I can't tell.
Hey there. Oh no, it's another kitty cat filter.
I forgot how to turn the.
Okay. Go into your settings. And hold on. And it's there should be a thing called backgrounds and filters. Do you see that?
Oh, there we go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then you just click on none. Okay.
Hold on. Not letting me.
Oh,
turn
okay.
oh,
I'll
there we
help
go.
you. I'll help. Did you find it?
I got.
There we go. And just tip it down so we can see your hands at work. Can you go a little more?
Yeah.
Oh, that would be good, I think. Does that
Yep.
look good, David?
Yep.
Okay. Wonderful. Alrighty. So, this is Agnes, and this is Professor David Curtin. And we've been having a great time here. I know you've been watching all along, so we can get right to it. Oh, and you're playing Chopin.
Great.
Are you ready?
Yeah.
All right. Dazzle us. Hey, Agnes. I'm sorry, we're gonna stop you here. Do you have your original sound turned on?
No, I have headphones in.
Oh, you have headphones in, but are you
Yeah.
on a computer?
I'm on a phone.
Okay. All right. Is there a way you can turn your
I
microphone
can
up a little bit?
I can take off my uh headphones.
That might help.
Okay.
So we're just having a little trouble hearing you. Okay, and then make sure. Oh yeah.
Okay.
Great. Okay. All right. Let's go again, and now we'll go for real.
Yeah.
Very nice. Good job. Okay. So like I did with some other people, I'm going to just start with this tempo indication. What does that mean? Lento ma non troppo.
I'm sorry, I can't hear you very well.
Oh, maybe I should
Should
yell.
I put in my headphones?
Okay.
Yeah, maybe you can use the headphones when he's talking, but then just unplug them when you play. Because we
Okay.
could hear you a lot better when they were unplugged.
Okay, yeah.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, so what is the tempo and what does it mean exactly?
Lento's like usually like on the slower side.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then I'm not quite sure what the other words mean.
Okay, so this is kind of a little lesson in itself on indications. So the nature of music, of course, it's written in its own system of notation. And we have a staff and we have a key signature and a time signature and we have notes, rhythms and everything. And it's all written in its own little language. And we have to interpret it. But then we also sometimes have words, actual words written maybe not in English, but in a language that the composer writes in. And we have to make sure that we understand exactly what those words mean, whether it's a word that's the title of the piece. And in a couple other of these master classes, I've been talking, well, what exactly does that title mean? And we could do the same thing with the etude, which is it's basically the French word for study, which is the way the French use that term. They use it to mean practice, actually. If you were in France, you wouldn't say, oh, I have to go practice the piano now. You would say, I have to go study the piano now. And so an etude is like a practice piece. And so titles are important clues, but anytime that a composer writes in a word, that's like a very important clue that we have to understand what it means. And in this case, ma non troppo means, the ma means but, non, not, troppo, too much. So it's slow, lento, but not too much, right? And then the other thing, we'll come back to that in a second. Well, what do you mean not too much? That's kind of vague, right? Well, how much is too much, you know? So these instructions, they sometimes are sort of vague and we have to understand the context, but it's important that we, you know, any word that, so for example, you see the word stretto or ritenuto, which means something a little bit different from rallentando, actually. You know, all of these words, we should really strive to understand and look them up if need be, every word in there. And I can guarantee you, if you go to you know, music school someday, your teachers will ask you this. They'll expect you to know, well, what is that word, you know? Anyway, and then the time signature is 2/4. What does that mean exactly? If you had to explain 2/4 to somebody who doesn't read music, how would you explain it?
So there's 2 beats per measure, and each beat is a quarter.
That's right. That's right. That's exactly right. So we should be feeling this in quarter notes. I mean, if we were tapping our foot, ideally, if you're playing for this for somebody, maybe a non-musician, and that non-musician is sitting there and they start to tap their foot, ideally, they should be tapping their foot with the quarter notes and not with the eighth notes. Now, that's kind of tricky sometimes when the tempo is very slow like this. But I think when you played it, it was almost as if Chopin had written it in maybe 2/2 or something, or he had written it in 4/8, and we were supposed to tap our foot with the eighth notes, because I hear it like this. La da la da dum. Is that how you're feeling it? La da da dum. the beginning? If you
Uh,
Yeah, go ahead.
I mean, I wasn't. Maybe I was. I just wasn't trying to.
Okay. So this is something we have to think about as musicians, like from the very beginning. Like if I'm playing this and it's 2/4, is someone really going to be hearing it in 2/4, or am I playing it so slow that someone is bound to be hearing it in 4/8 and is going to be tapping their foot to the eighth note, right?
Mhm.
So I think it needs.
Minutes?
Sorry, go ahead.
6 minutes?
Okay, thanks. So I think it actually needs to go faster at the beginning. And I know you hear recordings of this and you hear people doing it wildly different tempos. But one thing to keep in mind also, if as we look at this piece, which is only 4 pages long, there are some changes of tempo that Chopin writes in. So he writes in places like stretto and then ritenuto and rallentando, and then at in my edition anyway, towards where that contrasting section is in the key of B, it says poco più animoto. What does that mean? Poco più animoto.
Uh, a little like animated.
A little more animated, right? So it's
Mhm.
not, it's basically the same tempo, but a little faster. It's not like a completely different tempo, right? And this is very common, but very often the way people play this piece, by the time they get to the intense sections, which should be faster, but they shouldn't be twice as fast, right? And that's kind of like what I felt when you played it. When you got to the big, and I like the way you play them. There's nothing wrong with the way you played it, but that's twice the tempo that you started out at. And that to me means that the tempo you started out at was too slow. And the other thing about this opening tempo is if you play it too slow, it's very hard to make it sing because the notes on the piano don't sustain long enough, right? It's like,
Yeah.
da, 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 da. I mean, I can sustain with my voice, but on the piano, those notes are constantly dying away. And then the next note comes in, the next note, the next note. And so we lose that overall feeling of the line. I think it should be something more like, and I'm probably singing in the wrong key. Yes, I was. It should have some movement right from the beginning. Can you try it that way? Something like,
Yeah.
E is a bad key for me. It's out of my range. Oh, can you undo your headphones? Sorry.
Oh, yeah.
And I would think of starting right off the bat, not like, don't draw out that upbeat too long. And like, la da. No, it's la dum. Go right into it. I'll go faster. It still feels too slow to me.
Okay.
Can you go significantly faster? Good. I like that better. You can put the headphone back in if you. Now, again, tempo is a very personal thing, and it's the thing that musicians argue about the most and feel like, and I'm this way. I'm definitely guilty of this. If I hear something like a piece that I really love and know very well, and I hear a performance of it, and if it's even slightly too slow or slightly too fast, I'm like, I'm not interested. I don't even care. I don't want to hear the rest of it. They're playing it at the wrong tempo, and that's, maybe that's not the best approach, but I kind of can't help it because the tempo is the most fundamental thing. It's the first thing that you perceive when you listen to a piece of music, whether it's fast or slow. and it's the first thing that the composer indicates. The very first thing they write down before they even start to write any notes, they write the tempo. So that's an indication of how important it is. And I'm not saying that my tempo is right and someone else's is wrong, but that it's very important to think about the tempo and about its relationship to the meter. So for example, the fact that Chopin chose to write this in 2/4 instead of 2/2 or instead of 4/8 or something else. And that affects how it looks in the page also. Chopin could have written this whole piece with the exact same rhythm, but with a different meter and perhaps 8th notes instead of 16th notes. And every place where he has, quarter notes, those would be half notes. He could have written it out differently so that it looked visually slower. This is another thing composers do. They choose meters sometimes according to how many like fast notes, how much ink is going to appear on the page. Because naturally, if we look at something and we see a bunch of 8th notes, or later, if we look at the same rhythm, but it's a bunch of 16th notes, we're going to think, we see the 16th notes, we think, okay, this is a quicker piece, right? But if you were playing this at your original tempo and I had never looked at this music, I would never think that those were 16th notes in the middle voice there. They sound like 8th notes to me. You know what I mean? So whether you end up doing the tempo that I suggest or someone else, that's not the issue. It's that you think very carefully about the tempo and the meter, because that's our first job really, is to be convincing in terms of the tempo. Okay? There's lots more I could say, but James has appeared, which means I've talked too long.
We could probably let her just try that phrase one more time if you want.
You want to try it one more time? And this is the other thing. Sometimes let's say when a teacher tells you, oh, play it slower or play it faster, and you try and play it slower or faster, it might seem like a lot faster to you or a lot slower to you because you're used to playing it at a certain speed. But to the teacher or to the other person, it's probably not that much, right? So try playing it like what you would think is maybe too fast. Can you try and play it a little bit too fast for me? And we'll see how we like it. Okay, that seems about right to me. It could even maybe go slightly faster. Here's another thing to think about, and this has to do with the tempo. When you have this la da 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 da, and you get to that long sustained note, what comes after is long, da, 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 da. If you hold that for too long, because your tempo is too slow, ya da 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 da. Da, 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 da. The notes that come afterwards are going to stick out because the long note which preceded them has died away because the tempo is so slow that there's no way you can blend it in to make it sound natural, right? And it'll sound accented. It's not that you tried to make it accented, it's just that you can't avoid it because the sound of the piano is constantly dying away. All right? So that will sometimes just the sustaining power or lack of sustaining power of the piano is an indication of what your tempo should be. Because if your sounds are constantly dying out, then you're probably playing it, especially a composer like Chopin, who understood the piano better than anybody else, right? He wouldn't have written something where the notes are dying out and can't be sustained. That can't be what he intended. He probably intended for it to go a little bit faster than that. All right. In the Baroque era, what a composer would do is trill on that note to sustain it, because the harpsichord, as I mentioned to another student, the harpsichord has even less sustain than the piano. So a lot of times when we have trills in Baroque music, it's basically just to sustain a note that otherwise would die away. All right. And then, of course, Chopin sometimes wrote trills too, but in this case, he wrote that note, and we need to make sure that we hear that note all the way through and that it connects to the next note in a naturally singing legato way. And we might not be able to do that if the tempo is too slow.
Hmm.
Okay, that's probably all that we have time for. Great job, Agnes.
Thank you.
Good job. Thank you. And we have Jamie here.
Hi, Jamie.
Hi, hi.
Welcome.
Thank you.
And Jamie is in London.
Oh.
Am I right?
That's right. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
already dark here.
Oh wow. Yeah.
Yeah.
What time is it?
Now it's 6:30.
Oh wow. Wow. Well, Jamie, this is Professor David Curtin.
Hello.
Hi,
And
nice to meet you.
Nice to meet
and we have you down for some Rachmaninoff today?
That's right.
Wonderful. Are you ready to go?
Yeah, sure.
We can't wait to
so
hear
is
you.
just is the piano volume okay?
Sounds good to me. How about you, David? Okay, great.
Sure.
Take
Okay,
it
I
away.
can do an overhead view from this one.
Oh wow, you're tech savvy.
Well,
Great.
online piano teacher right now. So
Love it. Love it. Me too. All right.
Bravo. Very well done. Marvelous. I think that you have a very convincing way with this piece. I think, and so I'm probably not going to say a lot like you should do this, you should do that. I don't feel the need to give advice just because I'm in the, you know, I mean, of course it is my job, but I don't think that, you know, I don't think you necessarily need to change anything, but I could give you some things to think about maybe.
Sure.
And some of this I might not even say some of these things if I were actually in the room with you rather than hearing it over the less than ideal Zoom, you know, and but that's true for everybody. So, so first of all, I'm wondering, of course, I'm sure you know what, you know, why did Rachmaninoff choose to call these etudes tableau rather than just etudes? What is the tableau?
So it's a kind of picture of an unexplained
Yes,
object.
you're exactly right. And apparently Rachmaninoff had certain distinct pictures in mind, and we know what a few of these are. Like there's the one that's the Red Riding Hood story and the wolf, and you can hear the wolf. I think it's the F sharp minor. And then there's another one, the C minor A2 Tableau. We know that there's a certain painting of the sea. It's like a rough ocean, and it's and I think that people who have researched this know exactly what the picture is of a few of them. I don't know about this one. Do you happen to know? Does someone know what the picture is? Or did Rachmaninoff ever mention?
To be honest, I haven't actually looked into it, but
Okay.
also I know that it doesn't have a nickname like some of the others do.
Right, right. So that might be something to look into, because it might, you know, affect, and you might not know, because apparently Rachmaninoff didn't like to tell people what these things were in his head. He kind of liked to keep them more to himself. So I think that one thing, and in fact, I said this at the first performance that we had was a duet of two young ladies playing Bach, and I mentioned to them that when you have a piece where the writing is pretty similar all the way throughout, and there's not a lot of variety of the actual sort of scoring and the texture and whatever, it gives us kind of more of a challenge, because then we have to find, as the interpreter, ways to give it variety, and otherwise it becomes too much the same thing. And I think this piece is a little bit like that, because we have that same basic rhythmic figure. So one, I think, again, I might not be saying this if I were there in the room, because microphones do funny things, they adjust sound levels. But I feel like maybe in this case, the one thing we could have more of is the distinct differences between, let's say, piano at the very beginning, and then mezzo forte at measure 8, and then the diminuendo to piano. And if these things can be maybe a little bit more exaggerated, and we only get our first real forte about 1, 2, 3, I don't know, 18 measures in or something, right? Mm-hmm. So that if you were playing this for somebody who didn't have the score, they would have a very clear idea of what Rachmaninoff marked, even though they're not looking at the score. Like, oh, this is definitely piano. This is definitely mezzo forte. This is a different color. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah.
So that's something to think about.
I just realized I forgot to turn the original sound on, but
could
you hear it more or less okay? Or was it?
Oh, it sounded fine. I mean, again, everything is relative. So
the sound was fine, Jamie.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
I wouldn't have known.
Yeah. Yeah.
Great.
And I didn't even know about this original sound thing at all until James just informed me this morning. I've never gone into Zoom and messed with any of those features. So yeah, and then of course we have our only real fortissimo, right? At that big climax. And then this is another thing that I feel like there are places where there are these really interesting harmonic shifts. And it's all very tonal, but it's kind of unexpected modulations that might only last for a measure or two. And I feel like sometimes those need to be set off in time a little bit more. You're doing it, but I think you could exaggerate it slightly more sometimes. It's sort of like, again, you're sort of like taking the listener on a tour. You know, you're like the tour guide in the bus, and you're pointing at various things as you're driving through. And like, if you're in London, like, you know, there's the Houses of Parliament, and over here is, you know, London Bridge or whatever, you know, and you have to kind of direct your audience to look at those things and point, you know, like the way a tour guide does. And it might be sometimes a little bit too obvious. It might feel too obvious to you as you're playing it, because you've been playing this piece probably for weeks and months, and you know everything. But you have to imagine that your listener, this is the first time they've ever heard it. Just the same way, imagine that the person in the bus that you're giving the tour guide, they've never been to London before, and you have to like turn them and say, now look at this. Here's an unexpected E flat major chord or whatever. You know what I mean?
Sure.
So these are just things to think about. Again, I don't really have any specific criticisms of your performance. So let's say this was wrong or this was bad. It's just.
Are there any places in particular about the modulations?
There was one, like, let's see if I can find the one I was thinking of. Can you start, let's see, I don't have measure numbers in my score. Why don't you just start at the beginning, actually? And as I come up to some of these places, I might stop you.
Okay. Right, yeah. Oh, somehow I'm not getting your voice coming.
Sorry, I hit mute when you started to play. Right at measure.
Where goes the F minor?
Yes, that change of mode. Where we go to the relative. This is what I love about Rachmaninoff. We go to the relative major of D minor. We have that F major chord. And then we go immediately, you know, we think, oh, now we're in sort of like, it's like, the sun has come out because it's F major, but then immediately a cloud passes in front of that, you know, because now we're in F minor. And the implication of F minor is it takes us pretty far from where we were. You think about, you know, from one flat to four flats, it's this sudden shift. There was one other thing that as you started at the beginning, that I thought I would like to hear a little bit more of the upper notes of the left hand, sort of like bells tolling. In fact, all of this suggests to me a little bit the sound of bells, which is one of Rachmaninoff's favorite sounds. And I would like to hear that la-dum, pa-dum, la-dum, pa-dum, a little bit more. The notes that have the double stem.
Sure. Shall I try again?
Sure, yeah. Yeah. I think like as you lead into that F minor, well, let's say the measure before, la da da dum, you know what I mean? Ease into it. Don't play it as if, oh, this is of course what's going to happen. As if, in fact, I was saying this to someone again earlier. This piece again has sort of like I think I was talking about the Brahms Ballade with another student who played it. this piece has a little bit this improvisation feeling to me. Like I could imagine Rachmaninoff just sort of by himself somewhere and sitting down at the piano, it's sort of in the dark, and just making up something, you know. And as he's playing, even he is not really sure where he wants to go next, what key he wants to go to, what chord he wants to go to. And I think this is something that we have to, and it's a little bit of a contradiction because you're the tour guide, but even you, if you're improvising, you're not really sure where you're going to go. So if you can, as you're playing this, have the feeling of improvisation, and almost as if you are really not sure, even when you get to that spot, like, oh, should I go to F minor? Should I stay in F major? And then at the last minute you decide, oh, but maybe F minor would sound right here. You know what I mean? So that it's more sort of stream of consciousness, so that when the F minor harmony comes, it's unexpected to you. You can maybe convince yourself that you did not expect to hear that, even though you've already practiced it, you've heard it a million times. And that way, when we hear it, we'll be like, ooh, I was not expecting that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That makes sense? Try again from the beginning, and I promise I won't stop you again so soon. And I liked your bringing out those notes. It gives it an extra dimension. It's sort of like foreground, middle ground, and background.
Do you think the tempo's okay in the beginning?
Yes, I liked your tempo.
Okay.
Okay, good. Now, at this spot where it says tempo più vivo, I wonder if Rachmaninoff maybe
About
intended.
4 minutes.
Okay, I'm wondering if maybe he intended it for it to be a little bit more subito, like at that moment, faster tempo, whereas you kind of gradually accelerate, and maybe Rachmaninoff would agree with you and not with me, but I feel like if he had wanted a gradual acceleration, he would have written that in instead of at that moment, tempo più vivo. You might try it that way. You might not find it as convincing, but I feel like it should be.
It's kind of more of a technical, just a bit uncomfortable with that section.
Okay, yeah.
But let me try it. Maybe if I go from somewhere before that.
Sure. So you have a poco retard in the previous measure. So I would do that poco retard, and then when you get to the downbeat, and actually not quite at the downbeat itself, but at the beginning of the melody, which is on the next eighth after the downbeat, at the new tempo. Try it anyway. Good. I like that more. I feel like there's a sudden shift of mood, which I like, because interestingly, yeah. this piece is interesting because there are a lot of extended passages where it does stay pretty much over the same implied harmony, where like when you get to the first a tempo, and it goes back to D, it pretty much stays over that same D minor chord and has kind of the same figure, and so it's sort of static, and it maintains that mood. So that means that I think when we do have a change of mood, it could be a little bit more abrupt rather than gradual, a change of tempo along with the change of mood. And then I was going to say, right where you got to that forte section, which is about where you left off, again, this might be a function of the microphone or the Zoom, but I feel like that could be a more forceful forte to set it off from the previous piano and mezzo forte. I feel like that I should feel it arriving at a forte. It's not quite fortissimo yet, but I feel like it could be a bit bigger, a little bit more assertive there. Okay, and I don't know, how much time do we have left?
We're just about there.
Okay.
If he wants to play one more phrase of something, that would be fine.
Okay. Let's start at that forte and then keep going, if that's a comfortable place to start.
Yep.
Any place that's comfortable.
Oh, I think you might be on mute.
Keep forgetting. Okay. Rachmaninoff has, right at that forte, okay, he has those tenuto markings, and those are just for the quarter notes that are in the middle of your right hand, right? Mm-hmm. And then later in the next measure, it's a half note, and then it's a quarter again, and it's a dotted, it's a half note and a quarter. Can you put those tenuto notes a little bit more? I'm hearing a little bit too much of the eighths, triplet eighths, and not enough of the quarter, half, quarter, half, quarter, half, quarter, you know what I mean?
Sure.
Try that one more time, and then that's probably all the time we'll have.
Sure.
That's it's very difficult. It's very difficult to do because you have so many other notes. You have three other notes going on at the same time as that one, so, but that was better. I could hear it more clearly. That's one of Rachmaninoff's favorite markings, that line, that tenuto, all over the place in here. Anyway, that was very enjoyable. I really liked your performance of this, and I hope to hear more from you in the future.
Thank you very much. Yeah,
bravo, Jamie. Yeah, thank you. And let's a big thank you for Professor David Curtin here, who has been at this almost 4 hours.
Oh, it's fine. It's a pleasure,
everybody.
Time flew
been
by.
Great. Yeah, it really did, and it's been a great morning. So and I know many of you have elected to play on the class recital tomorrow night. There will be some emails going out about that soon, to how that's coordinated. It's optional, so if you don't want to play in it or you can't, that's fine, but just thought it would be fun. Does anybody have any questions in maybe the 2 minutes that we have left? Any questions they'd like to ask Professor Curtin?
I had one question.
Yeah.
I was a little bit nervous before playing. I found that it was really hard to keep legato, the physical legato. I was kind of and I was wondering if you've got any tips for kind of relaxing your hand somehow in that situation.
Oh, I don't know. Well, I'll tell you, first of all, I would never have known that you were at all nervous. So sometimes you have to think, you have to sort of stand outside of yourself and say, well, I might be terrified and nervous, but as long as no one else knows, it just doesn't really matter. Now, that's not the best answer. In fact, I remember reading when I was a student, was when Yevgeny Kissin first sort of exploded onto the scene, and played his Carnegie Hall debut. And I remember reading, I think it was maybe even in the liner notes of his album, that he had terrible stage fright. And I thought, how could he possibly have terrible stage fright and play like that? I've had stage fright, and if that's how he plays with stage fright, so it's about how he feels in here. But I know that no one in the audience would think that, in my case, I know a lot of people. I hear people say, "Oh, I'm always nervous when I'm backstage before I have to play. I'm very nervous, but then once I sit down and I start playing, I'm fine." And I wish that were the case for me. I'm the opposite.
Right.
Standing around backstage does not make me nervous. I'm not doing anything. I'm just standing there. It's when I have to actually go out and start to play, sometimes that nervousness actually helps and you play better than you would otherwise. A lot of times it doesn't, but I think the only remedy, or the only thing that I know of that helps, is just practicing performing so often that, and this reminds me of another, again, I think this was when I was in Louisville. This is when the great young pianist Alexei Sultanov just won the Van Cliburn competition. Now, he died sadly about 15 or 16 years ago, actually died too young. He was younger than me, but he came to Louisville and he gave a master class, and someone asked him, about nerves or stage fright. And he said, I used to be nervous, but then, once you go on tour and you play Tchaikovsky concerto night after night after night after night, it just abolishes nerves. You couldn't make yourself nervous if you wanted to. So a lot of it is just routine. The nervousness is your body's reaction to something unexpected and different. So if you make it routine, then your body doesn't have that fight or flight response. And it's difficult, especially in these times, because we can't play in front of people as much as we like. And it's somehow not the same playing for a camera. Find opportunities. In fact, our teacher, Mr. Jordan, James and I had the same teacher. Mm-hmm. He would always tell us, go out and, like if you're playing in your practice room and the custodian is outside, ask the custodian, say, could you come in here for a second and let me play something for you? It doesn't matter if that person knows anything about music or not. It's just having a person there and just making it a part of your routine, so that playing for people isn't some big special event that your brain starts to get excited about. It's just routine.
Sure. Okay. Yeah, I'll take that on board. Thanks.
Yeah, I think the Zoom classes here is the closest we can get to that, or just like Zoom groups with friends or colleagues. Unfortunately, I mean,
I remember reading too. This was probably about in the old days. I don't know. This is even probably before I was born. I remember there was a group of fairly famous pianists in New York who would, and probably a lot of people have done this. They were all friends with each other, and they formed a little group that they would play for each other. And let's say if there's four of them, one person's playing, and the other three would deliberately try and do distracting things. And they would do this to each other so to mentally toughen themselves, to simulate what an audience would do, instead of sitting listening very, very quietly and politely. Having kids actually is when I've had to practice and I've had like a toddler running around, or now these days, my cats, I find it hard that my cats are running underneath the piano and rubbing up against my leg as I'm playing. And even I have my limits there, but so steeling yourself, getting accustomed to distractions, it maybe is helpful as well.
Sure. Is it normal? One question that I've been thinking about a lot is if you're a professional performer and you have repertoire, it's very rare that it's like the first time you've ever played it. Whereas in college, it's almost always the first time you've played it.
Right.
But is it very different then when you have things that you've played many times?
Yes, it is. Now, can you hold on a sec? I just have someone knocking at the door, and I just want to.
Oh.
Yeah. There's been some really good questions here, and it's been a great session here. I've thoroughly enjoyed this, and well, I think yeah, we'll wrap this up here,
Okay.
and then we're gonna have to sign off.
Yeah. Well, yeah. In terms of playing things that you, yes, and there are certain things, of course, I played so often I could not, I could never forget them. I can sit down and play them without practicing. And I think the key thing is to just learn things far in advance and have sort of a schedule of you have practicing, you're learning the piece, and then you have a rehearsal phase. And you might play little sort of lower stakes performances for smaller groups of friends or something like tryout concerts. And I think like a lot of the big name famous pianists do this. They play little house concerts first and of the program that they're going to play next year on tour or whatever, Okay. So they have things sort of in the pipeline well in advance.
Fabulous. Wow. Well, thank you again, David, and thank you to all the performers. An email will come out soon about tonight, about the recital tomorrow, and it'll be very informal, but we'll just have a great time and have some great music. And looking forward to hearing all of your performances in the semifinal round. Congratulations to you all on that. And
Great job, everyone.
I think with that, we can sign off here. Have a great day. Have a great evening wherever you are. David, hang out for a second, though.
Okay, sure.
All right. Goodbye, everybody.
Thank you.
Great job.